Welcome to History at the OK Corral. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, leave us a comment down below, and share this episode with a fellow history lover. And now, on to tonight's episode. Montana, 1834. In the middle of the night, a camp of fur trappers and native guides bustles with activity. Under the flicker of their campfire's light, the native Delaware warriors who serve as scouts for the trappers daub red and black war paint on their faces in intentionally frightening patterns. Under the same light, their cohorts in the mountain men, who make up the majority of this trapping party, clean their rifles and check their supplies. Though this group of men is not a military outfit, all among them are preparing for battle. The Blackfoot, the reigning and rightful rulers of this territory, have killed one of the trappers' own, a beloved man known only to posterity as Mr. Howell. The evening prior, Howell had been out checking traps with another member of the party when they had been attacked by the Blackfoot. While his companion had escaped, Howell had been mortally wounded and suffered an ugly, agonizing demise in plain view of all of his friends and comrades. Now, the blood of the trappers and native scouts runs hot for vengeance. As the Delaware scouts carry out their ritual war dance, the mountain men confer with each other in hushed, angry tones about the revenge they intend to exact upon the Blackfoot. The Blackfoot, so named by the traders from the Hudson Bay Company, who noticed that, after trekking eastward to the Great Bay over grasslands that had been recently scorched by wildfires, the tribal members' deerskin leggings and moccasins were stained black with prairie soot, had long been the primary adversary in this area for not only the trappers, but many of their weaker neighbors who often bore the brunt of Blackfoot raiding and warfare. In this austere, unforgiving landscape, the Blackfoot have staked their claim, and it is well known amongst all that trespassers of any kind are not tolerated on their lands. But, however serious the consequences, the tide of fur trappers making their way north along the many rivers and tributaries that crisscross the country had been steadily increasing over the decade. Though their initial dealings with the Lewis and Clark expedition had indeed been largely peaceful, the continued incursion of trappers had been met with a consistent stream of hostilities from the mighty Blackfoot. While trappers often traveled in parties numbering in the dozens, nearly all of whom would be heavily armed, the litany list of trappers and mountain men who had lost their lives for trespassing was ever growing and well known amongst all those who ventured out on the wild expanses of the northern plains. Every man amongst the trapping party, now readying themselves for combat, had known this danger, as had their dead comrade Howell. But this does little to whet the trappers' and native scouts' appetite for vengeance in the name of their comrade. Although they are largely a motley crew of what most in the large cities back east would consider unfit for civilized society, they are not without leadership nor order. But in this harsh world, where decisions made in seconds can have consequences that spell life or certain death, allegiance and obedience are not offered in deference to office or pedigree. Here, a man's reputation and skills make him worthy of leadership, and few men on the whole of the frontier are more skilled, experienced, or well-known than the man who now leads this party of men bent on revenge. He is a tall, well-built, rangy-limbed man with a penchant for jokes and good humor, paired with an uncanny knack for survival and a hellacious bent for combat. His name is Jim Bridger. At this time in 1836, he is 32 years old, but he is already a longtime veteran of the frontier and a legend amongst his fellow mountain men. Born James Felix Bridger on March 17, 1804, in Richmond, Virginia, Bridger had been orphaned at the age of 13 and made his way to St. Louis to work as an apprentice for a newspaper printer. However, after reading one of the paper's advertisements posted by General William Henry Ashley calling for, quote, 100 men to ascend the river Missouri to its source, there to be employed for 1, 2, or 3 years. The 18-year-old Bridger had joined up along with several other men such as Thomas Fitzpatrick, William Sublett, Davy Jackson, James Clyman, Hugh Glass, and Jedediah Smith, all of whom would go on to become legendary mountain men in their own right. The group would go on to be known as Ashley's 100, and in the ensuing decade and a half since that advertisement's publication, Bridger and his cohorts had gone on to explore vast expanses of the American frontier that had only yet been seen by its native peoples. During this time, Bridger had survived countless clashes and run-ins with a number of tribes on the American plains. But it was the Blackfoot whom he feared most, and who most drew his quenchless ire. Now, as he makes his final preparations and mounts his horse, Bridger is silent amidst the cyclone of activity that surrounds him. There is no need nor tolerance for rousing speeches nor exhortations amongst this crowd, as Bridger well knows, and thus his instructions are terse. The Blackfoot are nearby. They are to catch them off guard and kill as many warriors as possible until they are able to drive the Blackfoot out of this vicinity. Then, and only then, will their vengeance be complete. Silently, the party now moves out, with their Delaware scouts leading the way. However skilled and reputable any of the mountain men may be, their skills in tracking are largely incomparable to their native guides who had been schooled in its practice since childhood. Now, under cover of the night, the mean-eyed and tight-lipped contingent makes its way across the sparse landscape, myopically intent on exacting their proverbial pound of flesh from their hated rivals. As the chill of the night winds envelop them, the men do their best to steady their nerves and temper their anger, lest a tactical mistake be made in this critical hour. Finally, the Blackfoot camp is in sight, but the Blackfoot sentries have alerted their comrades, and the Blackfoot are now securely ensconced in a grove of cottonwood and willow trees on the bank of a small river which runs behind them. Just before coming into rifle range of the Blackfoot, the contingent of trappers and scouts comes to a halt. Bridger and the other trappers huddle to discuss their next course of action against this unexpectedly entrenched enemy position. However, as the mountain men confer, the Delaware scouts see no need for what they believe to be baseless precautions. The Delaware, with tomahawk in one hand and rifle in the other, make an immediate headlong charge towards the Blackfoot position. They swarm into the thicket holding the Blackfoot with such ferocity that the Blackfoot are compelled to retreat, thinking that a far larger force has fallen upon them. As the Delaware hack and shoot down any Blackfoot that they can, the remainder of the Blackfoot force quickly swims midway across the river to a small island. From their positions, the still bewildered trappers can see the Blackfoot swimming across the river, holding their rifles above their heads so as not to waterlog them. Now, this band of warrior kings on the northern plains are, pitiably, trapped on an island with little cover and little possibility for escape. The trappers and Delaware scouts now take their time and ease into firing positions least exposed to the warriors on the island. The mood has now changed from one of uncertain foreboding to a level of conviviality often reserved for picnics and parties. The following account from fur trapper and participant in the battle, Isaac P. Rose, describes the scene as follows in his memoir, 4 Years in the Rockies. It may appear strange to our readers, yet it is nevertheless true that the feeling experienced by the trappers when about to make a raid on a band of hostile Indians resembles those of our country friends when going to visit a circus. It is relaxation from their usual employment, and a good time for fun, frolic, and adventure is expected. Every trapper had selected a tree or clump of bushes within fair rifle range of their enemies, and whenever a Blackfoot exposed any part of his person, a ball from one of the trapper's rifles would send the unfortunate native back to the happy hunting grounds. This fight may be considered regular target practice. One of the Indians would hoist a breechcloth above the logs, and in 1 minute it would be cut down by a bullet from one of the white men's rifles, followed by shouts and yells from the trapper who witnessed the shot. And, again, a trapper would place his wolfskin cap on his ramrod and raise it above his place of concealment, and it would soon be perforated by an Indian bullet. In this way the fight went on for several hours, but with little advantage to either party. Despite the mortal consequences, the mood is light, even when one of the trapper's own suffers a minor injury. A man named Mark Heed manages to incur a scrape on his upper arm from a bullet. The man, well known amongst his fellow trappers for his distinct, nasally drawl, cries out in shock and pain, "I've been shot!" The trappers further down the firing line from him cannot make out his words, and ask those in between themselves and Heed what the man has said. "He says he shot an Indian," yells one. The indignant tone of Heed himself then cuts through, correcting, "No, I didn't either. I said I was shot myself." The trappers instantaneously fall into an uproarious laughter, realizing that the wound is not serious and that their friend is not injured enough to encumber his personality. However, for the Blackfoot and for the Delaware scouts, there is no laughter to be had. The animus between the two tribes has run long and deep over decades of conflict, and the Delaware are intent on taking the fight to their hated enemy. As the firing carries on further down the line, a lone Delaware warrior swims his horse across the river to the foot of the island inhabited by the Blackfoot. From here, he creeps to within 50 yards of the Blackfoot position, as they remain preoccupied with firing upon the trappers across the river. The Delaware warrior, in an astonishing display of reckless vainglory, quickly climbs a cottonwood tree and takes up a position overlooking the Blackfoot. From here, he begins to pepper them with accurate sniper fire, dispatching 3 Blackfoot warriors in 3 successive shots. However, after the third warrior falls, the Blackfoot are able to ascertain the Delaware's position. Now, bark and tree limbs explode all around the Delaware warrior as he climbs down and retreats back to the foot of the island, swimming his horse back across the river to the renown and praise of his comrades. For hours more, through the afternoon and into the early evening, the fight drags on, with intermittent shots being taken, but no significant damage being done to either party. Finally, both sides are forced to make camp and break for the night, as darkness renders their targets indiscernible. The trappers and Delaware scouts make camp near the river, and rise early the next morning, intent on resuming their fight with the Blackfoot. However, upon cresting the ridge that separates their camp from the previous day's firing line, the trappers and scouts find the island deserted, the Blackfoot having absconded onto the prairie in the night. For now, life can return to the trappers' normal routine of trekking up and down streams, setting and checking traps, and completing camp chores. Jim Bridger will go on to lead this contingent to a successful haul this season, earning a worthy profit for each of the men in his charge. However, this fight with the Blackfoot will be but one of only the initial forays into combat with the mighty warrior tribe that the trappers will experience during this trapping season, before making their way to the yearly rendezvous in Wyoming to sell their furs. Though they have no intentions of settling upon this land, they are still trespassers, ones who the Blackfoot will offer no quarter to so long as they traverse their territories. But the many tales of fights and ferocities between the mountain men, their native allies, and the Blackfoot are, for tonight, other stories for other times. Thank you for joining us on this episode of History at the OK Corral. Be sure to click the like button, share this episode with a friend, and become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to support our work and gain early access to episodes, as well as ad-free viewing, you can become a member of this channel by clicking on the Join button, or click the link in the description to become a member on Patreon. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you next time on History at the OK Corral, home of history's greatest shootouts and showdowns.